Great, welcome. It's a great crowd. Thanks, Brian. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We're going to have hopefully a kind of a fun, casual talk about crypto and Coinbase, and so maybe if you don't mind, can we go back to how you started Coinbase?
Sure. So let's see. I studied computer science and economics in school, and I was always, even younger than that, I was always trying to start things. Like when I was a kid on the playground in elementary school, I tried to sell candy to kids, and I was always trying to start these various projects. But in school, I studied computer science and economics, and I was really interested in how software was going to disrupt these different industries out there. Healthcare and education, and finance was one of those. So fast forward a few years after college, I tried a startup which didn't really go very well. It was in the tutoring space, and I moved to Buenos Aires, Argentina, because I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And that was a country that had gone through hyperinflation, right? So that was the first time I got to see a country that had experienced that, and it really just changed the entire culture of the country. Like I remember being in a restaurant and seeing a menu, and they had these prices on the menu with stickers stacked on top of stickers, and basically the prices were changing so quickly they didn't want to print a new menu every week, right? And so, fast forward a few more years, I decided to move back to Silicon Valley. I wanted to think about, working at a startup that was doing really well so I could learn how to do it. And so I joined Airbnb, which I think I was employee 40 at that time, and it had grown really quickly. It was, grown to 600 people, and they were moving money all over the world to 190 countries. And I had sort of a front row seat. I was a software engineer there. I had a front row seat into how broken the global financial system was, because it was like high fees and delays, and each country we were trying to move money into and out of had these kind of opaque, broken infrastructure, like a little oligopoly of different payment companies there. And
so fraud too.
Yeah, high fraud. So 2010, I was home for Christmas visiting my parents, and I happened to read the Satoshi Nakamoto whitepaper for Bitcoin, and I think I just saw it on Hacker News one day. And I remember my mom was like, "You should come down and spend time with the family." And I was like, "I'm reading papers on the internet, this is really exciting." I remember having this thought actually that this is the most exciting thing I've read in 5 years. And I think the reason it sort of captured my attention, and I didn't even really understand it at first when I read the Bitcoin whitepaper. It was really complicated. I had to reread it 3 or 4 times in the coming months. But something about it captured my imagination, because I remember thinking, the internet was such a transformative thing in society. It's this global decentralized protocol for moving information around. But here was another protocol that was also global and decentralized, but it was for moving value around, or money. And I remember thinking, wow, this could be as big as the internet. And I wasn't really old enough to start one of the formative internet companies, because I was still in school. But I was like, whoa, maybe if this is going to be as big as the internet, I'll be there at the beginning, and I could start one of the formative companies. So, for the next year, I just kind of couldn't get it out of my head. I started going to Bitcoin meetups in San Francisco, and I remember thinking actually in 2011, maybe I'm too late to this industry, because there was already some exchanges in San Francisco, like Trade Hill and Mt. Gox. It was in Japan. So anyway, long story short, I was still at Airbnb. I started working on a prototype that would eventually become Coinbase on nights and weekends. And I applied to Y Combinator. They wrote me a check, and I was like, all right, maybe I'm not crazy, because all my friends thought it was the stupidest thing ever. And so they gave me the check, and I went to go try it out.
That's awesome. Yeah, Mark Andreessen tells a story where he moved out in '93 for Netscape. And he was absolutely, he moved out before Netscape, and he was absolutely convinced that he had missed the computer revolution, and that thinking back now, '93 was right before, obviously the 90s and the whole internet thing. And apparently at the time, CD-ROMs was the hot thing in the Valley.
Yeah.
Which sounds kind of funny today. It was encyclopedias and things like this. So.
Yeah, you think a lot about this, these technology trends. VR. Is it in the winter? When is the time where it's gonna have its iPhone moment? So it's really hard to time these technology trends. But I don't know if you might have.
Yeah, no. One of the things I feel like I've learned over the years is the things that me and my friends or whatever people like you think are gonna happen. I feel like most of them have happened. I started a machine learning company in 2008, which turned out to be probably too early. But I think we were in the end, we were right. We were just wrong on the timing. Which, by the way, as a startup means you're wrong. You're really wrong. But but that often the sort of these, so I'm sort of a innovation maximalist. Like I think VR is actually about to come back. There's actually an exciting thing tomorrow for those who are into VR. Obviously crypto is, to me it feels like you only get a few of these big things in your career. And for me, this is clearly kind of a new computing paradigm and a chance to really kind of make your mark.
Yeah.
The timing's hard to predict. Who knows? Like it might take longer, and people who know about this stuff know there's issues and UX and scalability and all these other things. But
yeah, I think I like your concept of nerd energy. It's like, look what the engineers are doing in their free time. And I think you were the one that told me that Stanford has this elective computer science class, and the number one class is AI, and the number two is crypto now in terms of an elective for computer science. So it does feel like the engineers in the world are really excited about crypto. It's a good indicator of where things are going.
Well, I kind of think of it as like there's not that many, like when you go to work 9 to 5, you're working for a business manager who generally, in most companies has a 1 to 2 year horizon, right? And so how many contexts are there where people can really work on things that are farther away, right? And so government and academia, things like this, like government-funded projects, academia. And then the other one, like how do people in Silicon Valley how do engineers kind of vote, so to speak, on the things they think are cool? It's the nights and weekends, right? So I think there's a deep reason why, the Homebrew Computer Club, like all of these kind of great things in the history of technology did start in garages and, clubs and, the Bitcoin meetups you went to were in many ways the kind of this decade's Homebrew Computer Club, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Instead of hacking on computers, they were hacking on money.
Yeah,
right?
Totally.
I think, we'll see. But you think so.
Yeah.
So, okay, so great. So you started the company, I think, we invested in 2013 at kind of I don't know if it wasn't really the first kind of, upswing of Bitcoin, but it was one of the bigger ones that kind of got more attention. And then there was kind of what we call the winter. Can you talk about that period and kind of the lessons learned?
Yeah, well, crypto keeps going through these big run-ups that are, enormous, and then it corrects back like 50 or 60%, and then it'll do another one. Each time it's at a new plateau, and it's been really kind of stressful to manage a company during those periods. And I think you invested during that Series B was one of those run-up periods where we were just feeling totally understaffed. We didn't have enough working capital to service all these people who wanted to buy crypto. And that's obviously a good time to raise because it looks like things are on the up and up, and you go out there and you try to raise when there's a lot of interest. Now, of course, that's also when usually everything is on fire in the company, and there's a huge backlog of customer support, or you don't have enough people, or whatever. So it's been interesting to manage through those cycles. It's also been interesting just to manage kind of my own psychology as a CEO and a founder, and then the team's psychology as an extension of that. Because you always have this pressure sometimes as a CEO where you're like, you can step back and say, okay, this part isn't going well, this part is going well, what do I think the long-term potential is? But then, in the next minute, you have to hop on the phone call and sell a candidate on why they should join. And so there's sometimes you feel like you have to put on a really positive face, right? Yeah. And so there was a crypto winter, which I guess was late 2014, 2015, where it was interesting. A lot of people, the price had come down enormously. There wasn't really that much exciting happening in the space. I think we had probably 25% turnover that year, and I was kind of week after week getting in front of the company, hey, this is going to be a long game. The fundamentals are there. It doesn't really matter what the price is. We had a lot of people who had joined kind of at the peak, and they had just seen the price go down for 18 months, 2 years. Their friends, and it's the friends and family thing is a tough one. You go home for Thanksgiving, and they're like, oh, you're working on Bitcoin? The New York Times said that was a scam or whatever, And so the family test, people want to be, they want to feel good in their peer group about what they're working on. I think that's an important lesson about entrepreneurship generally, actually, is that everybody I've ever talked to who said, I'm going to start this company, and I'm just going to do this for a couple of years to kind of make some money before I go do my next thing, which is the real thing. In the back of my head, I'm always like, you're already done, you just don't know it. Because the first 2 or 3 years of any startup is just setback after setback, and nothing works. And within 3 years, that thing that was hot won't be hot anymore. And so the people who I see that actually make companies successful, it's they have this, they're passionate about it for some other reason than just building a company. And they've already kind of mentally signed up, like this is going to take 10 plus years. And usually after 2 or 3 years, you're just been like setback after setback. By the 5-year mark, you're starting to see some signs of success. And by 10 years, it's like it's actually working.
Yep.
So Coinbase is about 6 years in now, and like clockwork, kind of right around the 5-year mark, we started to really see signs of success. But I think we're really like 1% of the way on this journey.
Yep. So then let's maybe move forward then. And so then what happened? And I mean, so there's obviously things like Ethereum and this kind of proliferation of new kind of networks and tokens and things like this. Where do you think we are now?
Yeah, so I remember for a long time, when Coinbase started, and for a long time after that, it was Bitcoin only, right?
Yeah.
So we were Bitcoin only, and I was my mental model for this was like TCP/IP got invented. There's some other protocols that are out there, but the vast majority of the network is going to run on this one protocol, Bitcoin. And I think 95% of the investor activity and entrepreneur activity was in that one protocol. And of course, then this kind of scaling debate happened about how is Bitcoin going to scale? And these factions emerged in Bitcoin, which I was very surprised by. And my initial reaction was like, all right, let me jump in there and try to help steer the industry towards something that would create a global scalable payment system, because my motivation for starting Coinbase and our mission was to create an open financial system for the world. I thought like that would create more freedom and innovation and all these good things. And I saw Bitcoin sort of turning into like digital gold. It wasn't going to work as a global payment system because it wasn't scaling. So I flew to China to meet a bunch of the miners. I went to some conferences and met a lot of the core developers. And I really kind of put out like a statement, like, hey, I think we should move in this direction. And it turned out I kind of totally overestimated my ability to influence the, people weren't using logic, they were using emotions or tribalism or something. And it didn't go in that direction. So I remember there was a moment where it flipped in my mind, and I was like, oh wow, like we can't just be a Bitcoin company, because Bitcoin may not be the thing that creates the global payment network. It might just stay as digital gold. And I remember actually the moment where I woke up, I was at this conference, and the next morning I woke up and I was like, oh man, Bitcoin's not gonna get there. Yeah. And so I kind of went back to San Francisco and told the team, like, all right, we're gonna add more currencies. We're now a multi-currency platform. We started with Ethereum. We now have 5 on there, and then we're gonna add a whole bunch more. But I think, now I think of it as a slightly different mental model. So it's not TCP/IP, that's one protocol to rule them all. There's going to be a couple of these, like Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or GIF, JPEG, PNG, if you want to use an internet analogy. And in a way, that's good, because it means there's multiple competing standards, and you kind of de-risk any one of them becoming like this slow incumbent. In a way, it's bad, though, because it means that people who are new to cryptocurrency, they have to try to wrap their head around something that's more complicated. If everybody getting into crypto is like, like you always see it in Star Trek and Star Wars, that are like, how many galactic credits do you get, or whatever. So if it was everybody just used one system, that would kind of be simpler, but I guess it's not going to be that. And so now we have this heterogeneous system with all this Cambrian explosion of new tokens and ideas and protocols, which is really amazing. But it's de-risked it, but it means it's a little bit more complex and unapproachable.
You could imagine, one of the beautiful things about software is the way you can architect so many different interesting things. So for example, you could imagine a system where the end user deals with, let's call it a stable coin or whatever, Bitcoin or something else, has a single thing they deal with. And then maybe behind the scenes, these networks are interacting using different tokens. And maybe it's moving across multiple networks, and each one they're trading tokens behind the scenes or something like that, right? So you could imagine like the ability to abstract away some of that complexity for the end user, but still maybe get the benefits of it.
Yeah. And that's been one of our goals, certainly at Coinbase, is I always tell the team our strategy is to be the most trusted, like secure and compliant, and then build the products that are easiest to use. And so that definitely falls into the easy to use category. Is like, this technology is really powerful. It has all this potential to help the world. How can we actually make it simple enough for the average person to get benefit out of it? And those kind of ideas, like just abstracting away underneath, can be really powerful. Like, a great example is on a website. You go visit it. Maybe it's sending JavaScript and CSS and HTML over the wire, but it doesn't really matter to the user. They're just seeing one thing.
Yeah, I mean, one thing we should say in case this gets on the internet, that I'm a big, I think you'll say the same thing. I'm still a huge fan of Bitcoin. I have a Satoshi white paper on my wall in my office if you ever come to my office.
Yeah.
So for people on the internet,
Bitcoin,
so we are pro Bitcoin, Twitter, please.
Don't blow up my Twitter.
So that said,
Bitcoin changed the world. I would not
that
be
said,
here if it wasn't for Bitcoin.
I want to talk about why Ethereum is so cool, right? Which is, and by the way, by the way, I think you probably are saying, I consider ourselves like a crypto maximalist or innovation maximalist. We are pro like all of these things, and we hold a lot of these things. And so just to be clear, like we're not,
Yeah,
but
I'm agnostic.
But the thing about Ethereum, so like Bitcoin does have a scripting language, but it's deliberately made to be kind of limited because for security reasons, which is the trade-off they decided to make. Ethereum is sort of take the opposite attack, which is to have an incredible, a JavaScript-like, Turing complete is kind of the computer science lingo language that's relatively easy, 10 lines of code, and that led to, for example, the ICO thing, which was really like it was one of their examples on their homepage was how to do crowdfunding. And so it's just relatively easy to get going. And that I think, at least in my mind, I don't know what you think, kind of helped kickstart the 2015, 16, 17 kind of renaissance of crypto.
I totally agree. Yeah. I mean, that was a fundamental innovation on top of Bitcoin was a more sophisticated coding language, which allowed these smart contracts and all these tokens and everything to get created, which has all kinds of implications we could talk about. What's cool is there's all these it's really a Cambrian explosion of ideas. There's, privacy coins, ZK snarks. There's people creating, next generations on top of Ethereum, things that are even more scalable. So it's exciting to see the amount of innovation in the space.
If you look at all the protocols we use on the internet today, they're all, 30, 40 years old. There's been almost no protocol development. Something that struck me was, remember when there was the SSL Heartbleed bug, I think it was 2 years ago?
Yeah.
It came out in that process that it turns out there was like a half a developer who maintained SSL, which is just insane. Like it was like literally like some person part-time, right? So think about SSL. So SSL, is the encryption, everything on the internet that's encrypted. Oh my God, like all the banking, like all your privacy, everything, and and that's because there's been no money and there's no business model for protocol. So the only business model was government funding, right? Back when TCP/IP and all these things were, DARPA funded all this stuff.
And Google charity from the AdWords, money printing machine.
Yeah, and so they'll give, now I think after that happened, like Google and companies kicked in some money to SSL and things.
Yeah.
But one of the things going on now, right, is just like, it's this golden age of protocol development. So Ethereum itself is, has all this expressiveness and excited people, but then it inspired all these other, like Juan Filecoin or whatever, just like all these other people said, hey, maybe there's a business model for protocols. And that was something no one's thought about for 40 years or something.
Totally.
And a lot of academics now have gotten excited about it, and so just like that level of, I don't know, for me it's hard not to get excited about all of that, like fundamental computer science. Like Dan Bonet, who works with us, who's at Stanford, and he feels like, look, it's just like unlocked to like half of a whole new field for him essentially.
Yeah, that's true. I remember studying computer science and being a software engineer. I don't think I'd ever met anybody who'd actually created a protocol until crypto. There's like some esoteric fields of computer science. There's people who do like compilers and operating systems, but I'd never met anybody who'd created an actual protocol. And it wasn't until the Bitcoin protocol, I remember I really tried to dig into it when building the early version of Coinbase. And I was like, wow, this is something totally different and new, and like learning all this binary codes they were encrypting in there and everything.
Well, and if you did distributed systems, which would be the closest thing prior to blockchain stuff, the core assumption was you or someone you trust controls all the computers, right? And so all the algorithms are all based on that premise. It's just like they're sitting in Google's data center and you're trying to like sync up your database or whatever, right? And so this is like now what if you take away that assumption? Like there's a whole new kind of design space unlocked, which is just also just really cool from like an intellectual academic point of view.
Totally.
So anyway, so let's talk about now. So now how many employees do you have now?
A little over 500.
And so. You've been going through this kind of rapid growth phase and have been, kind of really, hiring a lot of senior management and kind of taking the company to kind of a more, just sort of the next stage of, I guess, the company's development or something. Can you talk about sort of some of the things you've been thinking about or learned from that, or like lessons learned, or?
Yeah, well, at every stage of the company, something totally different has to happen, right? So initially you're in this room with 10 people and you kind of know what everybody's doing and you're just working on a product and answering support emails. And then you get to 50 and you start to like not, you need some layers of management, and you get to 100. And anyway, I mean, our most recent one, we went from kind of like 150 to 500. And I remember, some things changed. So one thing is there's this, Dunbar number, I think it's called, with 150 people. So once you cross that number, you stop being able to really remember who everybody is. And some people in the office, you walk by and you don't actually know their name for the first time. So that's pretty interesting. And then communication starts to be a challenge too, because in a group where you know everybody, you can kind of just pass the word down and you know what everybody's doing. You can hold it all in your head. And when you cross that threshold, now we're at 500, I don't actually know what every single person in every team is doing. I don't necessarily know their name. And so there's a challenge in leadership, which is like, well, how do we just get everybody moving in the same direction? And so that's where things like values, your mission, your vision statement, having communication channels to pass things through the company and say, okay, here's our Q4 OKRs. We're going to do this all hands meeting. I'm going to make a communication to the leadership team. They're going to tell all the first line managers and the second line managers that, hey, we need to have this thing done. And so that's the skill set that I've been learning. Actually, I'm a big fan of executive coaching. That's something I advise a lot of entrepreneurs to do and CEOs, is learning on the job. I think it's been really helpful for me to work with people who've previously been CEOs. I have a board, which is really great as an advisory function, but I actually like to hire somebody to come in and work with me on various projects too.
I mean, one of the things is just because you happen to start a company and maybe found product market fit doesn't mean you necessarily know how to run a product meeting or how to just all this sort of blocking and tackling kind of basics. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I don't know, I find this a lot especially with kind of entrepreneurs who used to be engineers.
Yeah.
I'm, by the way, a huge fan of executive coaching, and we do it ourselves. I think it's just a fantastic thing if you have the means to do it, because you learn about, you learn your weaknesses, you kind of get your 360 kind of feedback.
It's like therapy.
Yeah, it's like professional therapy. But also, why would you know this stuff, right? A lot of this stuff, right? Your background was mostly engineering. You worked at Airbnb, but it's just a ton of stuff to learn. There's nothing wrong with learning that. Getting help learning that. So, sorry, were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say. For me, I think a lot of people, founders, they like the early stage. They just want to focus on product, and that's fine. And then they sort of move on to their next thing or hire a professional CEO or whatever. For me, I actually want to be a CEO, run a business, have it be enormous. I'd like to run a public company someday. So for me, it was very important to go train and learn those things. Yeah. And
you're very deliberate about it. You do a lot of coaching, a lot of seek out advice. You're sort of you're very into kind of personal and professional development. Is that right?
That's right. And actually, one thing the board, we do 360 reviews. You've probably written a bunch for me, but
he always sends NPS feedback after every board meeting. What can we do better in the board? Every time you interact with Brian, you get how can I do it? It's great. Great.
We have a good two-way feedback culture. Yeah. I tell the employees that too. I was like, the board gives me feedback too.
Yeah, so that's great. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about crypto. So perhaps people in the audience, some of them maybe are into it, some aren't. The ones that aren't, a question I get a lot is, what is this useful for beyond speculation, right? So far, a lot of the, frankly, use cases have been kind of more speculative. That's clearly not why we're involved. What are the end user applications that get you excited?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of the early ways that people get into crypto is often to try to make money or invest, but I think the potential of it is much bigger than that. And that's what we focus on a lot, is trying to shift it to these utility cases. So my three kind of current favorite use cases that I'm looking to are, number one, it's emerging markets, right? So there's a lot of people out there who don't have access to any financial system whatsoever, but they do have a cell phone now. Yeah. That's actually described as about between 1 to 2 billion people in the world who have a cell phone but no access to financial services at all. And so I'm really excited about that. In fact, I started a charity that's making small direct cash payments to people in places like Venezuela with crypto, which we can talk about. It's
also technically it's a very good use case, because one of the features of crypto is that the recipient can verify they got the money using just math and not having to ask a third party, which is how our existing payment system works. You ask a bank. And those billion people, it's roughly 1 billion. They can get a $15 Android phone now. That will come down. You'll be able to get a $3 phone. It'll probably be like Benedict Evans, who works with us, he does all these studies on this. There'll be something, there's 3.5 billion smartphones. It'll be 5 billion, just based on the price charts and everything. Mm-hmm. And a significant number, it's 1 billion, 2 billion, don't have bank accounts, don't have ID. don't have any kind of government issued ID. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, what are the other theories for getting them into the economic system, right? I mean, you need to give, I mean, there's a cash-based economies. Like, to get them online, this is a great architecture.
Yeah. And it's a great example where like crypto is providing something that's like a 10x improvement over what their local system is doing. Another thing that I'm excited about is it's like prediction markets, right? I think that's a really cool use case where you can have kind of the wisdom of the crowds all over the world. People can come in and predict like what will happen in all kinds of questions in the world. Who's going to win this election? Anything, and we can sort of source that data to get wisdom about the crowds. I'd say another area that I'm excited about is this kind of, it's like social apps that we think of today, Twitter, Reddit, Facebook, YouTube. But there's people building new versions of those apps where every upvote or like button is money being transferred. So you could imagine a version of Reddit that it's global, and every upvote is money being transferred. And so there's people actually getting paid to like answer these questions or submit great content. And it's kind of interesting, like if you imagine the internet got reinvented, but now it has a native currency that's inherently global, what would people do with that? And you've talked about this. I think you're very articulated on it, just saying the business model of the internet is like, since there's such a steep curve to get someone to put in their credit card, you basically just collect all this data on the customers. They're the product, they're not the customer. Then you sell the exhaust of their data to advertisers, and that's kind of been the default business model. But if you can actually move money around as easily as you can sending an email, then a lot of new business models get created.
Yeah, and I think of it as, what the internet's done a lot of wonderful things. To me, one place it's fallen short is in figuring out a good way for creative people to make a living, right? So writers and musicians and, right, I mean, it's been, musicians and, I don't know, people who create video games and videos and whatever. There's exceptions. There's like, PewDiePie or whatever, like the top YouTube people and things. But for the most part, it actually has been.
Who's PewDiePie? I don't know.
It's like top. I think he's top on YouTube. Yeah. So you're,
I'll check that one
you got
out.
to get more culturally up to speed here.
I gotta get on it.
He's like a video game commentator on YouTube. So,
okay.
Yeah. And he makes like millions of dollars a year. So, but there are those exceptions, and they get highlighted. But the vast majority, on average, like musicians, for example, writers and things, like it should be a golden period for them, right? There's 4 billion people. You can write something, and seconds later, 4 billion people can read that, listen to that. And I think the willingness to pay is there. It's the mechanism. So, and I think we saw that. To me, like we saw that with the iPhone. I remember I was involved in investing in the video game business back before the iPhone, and it was just a truism in that business that the only business model was either console games sold for $50 or banner ads on your thing. And the iPhone made it super, super easy to do in-app payments, right? And now, Fortnite, 300 million last month, and like, I mean, it expanded to other platforms, but like, Supercell sold for 10 billion last year. All micropayments on the iPhone because it was easy enough, because it was built in, right? And so I think about that too. Like, could you have models like that for writers, musicians, or whatever? There's all sorts of interesting creative things.
Yeah.
And the idea that we're 20 years into the internet and it's like done and this is it and it's just going to be some ads, like that's the model. And I don't know.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think you're right. Like with crypto, I think we're in the dial-up phase where the internet, it's kind of slow and clunky, and these, you have like a webcam that looks like a coffee pot, and people are like, okay, that's the internet. Yeah. There's like blinking GIFs or whatever. But I think crypto's in the same phase. So these are some of the things that are going to have to come together, I think, for crypto to have that iPhone moment. It's like, we've got to get the scalability of the networks up. The volatility of the coins probably needs to come down, or stable coins, which is like this whole area of research happening right now with like a dozen teams, is going to be a really good one. I think the developer tools probably need to get better, and I know that like Unity, I think, is working on this for VR, and just creating like a smart contract and publishing it is still really clunky. So the developer tools need to be better.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's to me, if you sort of compare at our firm, so at the if you compare crypto to I don't know, SaaS or like all the other kind of or machine learning AI startups. I I'd say it's at least as many like highly qualified teams come through our doors a week as any other sector, if not more. I mean, I think it's like something like if you just sort of take the kind of high quality teams, it's like 20% or something.
Well, when you guys invested, I guess it was 2013. I mean, how did you decide to get it, like make a big bet on this? Because that was a contrarian bet at the time in a big way. And I remember, you know, we weren't much to look at. We were probably 10, 15 people sitting in an apartment.
You guys were still in that apartment.
Yeah.
It's funny. Yeah, so I mean, my own thing. So I had started a security company way back in 2004, which I sold to McAfee in 2006. And so I'd been interested in computer security. I just always found it interesting, like, 'cause it's kind of technically interesting, and it's this kind of cat and mouse dynamic, and just, I don't know, I'd always follow, and I still follow it pretty closely. And so, you know, this thing, you know, Bitcoin, of course, has Hashcash built in. And so actually it started, it's funny enough, like, talking about Y Combinator, Paul Graham was in Boston, my company was in Boston, and I pitched him, I'd read his anti-spam blog post, and I had this whole idea to use like Hashcash. It's funny, these same characters recur. And like Dan Bonet I'd pitched to, and all these other people. But Hashcash is a core algorithm used in Bitcoin mining. But that idea actually dates back much further, and originally it was this idea that why is there spam in the world, like email spam? There's email spam because the internet, it's a tragedy of the commons. The internet lets anyone send a piece of email for free, and so some people abuse that and send billions of emails, and as long as 2 people click on it, you know, it's enough to make money because they're paying 0, right? And so the idea with Hashcash was, what if every time you sent an email, you had to solve a cryptographic puzzle? And that would be, it'd be such a small number that, an easy enough puzzle that like a normal computer could do it easily and it wouldn't be a big deal, but the spammer would get killed. That was Hashcash, yeah. You know, and I tried to do like a startup around it or whatever, but it's like really hard chicken and egg problem. How do you get the servers? And you know, I just couldn't figure it out, so I didn't do it. But I'd followed it, and then I remember when Bitcoin came out, I was like, oh wow, someone's trying to like extend on Hashcash. Yeah. But like, I mean, I'd love to say I saw the future in 2000. I read it in 2010, but I thought it was like super interesting idea. But I don't know. I just thought, like, what are the odds of it actually? People believing that it has value and getting traction. So I kind of put it back on the bookshelf or whatever, and then you guys came along. I don't know, and just meeting you and seeing all the energy around it, and meeting them. Just it's the smart people on the weekends. I just kept meeting smart people, and it was kind of this thing where like, I don't know. I think about it like if the friends you have, like how smart are they and how excited are they about this area? And every time I had people that weren't excited, I was like, wait, but did you read this paper? And like, no. And like, did you do any work? And like, no. And to this day, I feel like that. There's so many straw man arguments against it. Like, you read about it? Like, you know, some people are skeptical and have read about it, so I don't want to say that everyone has. But it's sort of this, I always look at this like, is there a correlation between how much they've read and how kind of open-minded and intelligent they are and how excited they are? And it just sort of seemed like more and more of the really smart people kept telling me that, and just getting that chatter and following it closely and reading the technology, and I don't know.
Yeah. But I love your theory too, by the way, about how people are scared of everything that's new. You know, you and I have talked about this a lot, because that's actually one thing I didn't anticipate starting a company, was like how much negativity you would get out there, like on social media and stuff like.
There's this book called The War on Fun, and there's a blog post about it. If you Google like chess is bad for you, and it's just you can just read the Medium post. I love this Medium post. And it's literally in like, I don't know, 1860, there was this whole scare across the United States about kids they're like zombies. They're staring at the chessboard, and they like go, it's like exactly what you read about people on iPhones now. And like Mark Andreessen always says this, he's like, yeah, to the outsider, it looks like you're staring at the iPhone. Inside, I'm like communicating with like the smartest people in the world, and like, why would I be talking to you? Sorry, you know, it's like inside, outside, like, right? And same thing, like chess. Like anyone who's played chess knows, like, this is a super interesting game, and you're not like a zombie or anything else. But this book, it's like a cartoonish book, but it goes through, and it's like bicycles, cars. Oh my God, cars. Like, you go read about that stuff, and you had to, like, all these rules. You had to, like, stop the car if you saw a horse, and take apart the car, and like make sure the horse didn't get close to it. And it was like, oh my God, you know. And then it's just like, like Dungeons and Dragons was gonna like make all the whole generation like Satan worshipers, and like it just goes through like literally every generation accuses the younger generation, whatever the X, Y, and Z things they're excited about is going to destroy the world and kill them and make them all zombies. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm too optimistic about this, but I've read enough of these things to kind of come around to thinking, I mean, like, there are bad things in the world. I'm not saying, like, you know, there aren't bad things, but I'm just generally skeptical of the, you know, the kids are doing it, it must be destroying their minds and everything. I don't know. Like YouTube is a good example. Like, people say, oh, it's trained their mind. Like, I think YouTube is the greatest MOOC on earth, right? It's like, it's the best education system on earth. And like, instead of sitting in a class and listening to 2 hours of stuff you already know and then 5 minutes of learning, it's just like boom, 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 next. And it's like, boom, you're learning. And it's like, think about it. It's like, it's like algorithmic teaching. It's like incredible. I don't know. I mean, there's obviously things you can do that are a waste of time, and not everything's good and all this. But like on net, I believe these things are good, and I think the same thing is here. Like you can always find bad cases with crypto, but on if you dig into it and you see, like of course on net, this is going to be a very positive innovation for the world. I mean, I strongly believe that.
Yeah, I think I've always wondered if there's something about human psychology, like an evolutionary trait or something that it makes us kind of, most people skittish about something that's really new, right? Like if you imagine the tribalism or primitive human running around, it's like something really brand new most of the time would be dangerous or something like that. And just like anybody who's born, I imagine there's all these knobs you can turn about, are you left-handed or right-handed or whatever. And one of those is like, how open are you to like new technologies or maybe new things generally? And so it's sort of a shame because I think, I personally believe like technology is the most important thing in the world, improving the human condition in pretty much every field, whether it's like entertainment, medicine, education, whatever. But there's a very few set of people out there that are, willing to go take brand new things and commercialize them and bring them into the world. And it's this rare skill set also of like, you have to kind of be, maybe have the educational background to actually understand a little bit of what the potential is of this thing, but also like the communication skills to be able to talk to other people about it and kind of recruit enough people to come to your crazy idea and get your V1 out. And it's much easier now than it probably was 100 years ago because there's things like all this great writing on the internet and there's angel investors, which 100 years ago there probably was no such thing. Yeah. So it's much easier now than it ever was, but I think about that, like how can we get 1,000x as many entrepreneurs building commercial, cool new things with technology in the world?
I think, the positive side too is all the things I just mentioned, right? Those things maybe outside of D&D or something, they're all like very popular or pretty popular today or something. Cars and all these things worked. So they eventually did break through. I think a lot of it just requires explaining things, evangelizing kind of, and then I think ultimately showing people will really believe when they personally experience the utility, right? And that will be a critical moment for the crypto world, right? Is that when someone who's skeptical goes and has that moment, that's sort of this magical moment that, maybe the person, I don't know what each person's magical iPhone moment was or something, but at some point you have that moment and you're like, okay, I can see why, there's bad things, but this thing's also really cool, and it made my life better, right? And crypto hasn't gotten there yet, really, for most people.
I think that's right. So there's only about 40 million people in the world today who have a little bit of crypto. Yeah. And most of them have gotten into it by buying a little bit as an investment. So it's how do we get to 400 million? How do we get to 4 billion? That's roughly half the world or about the amount that have internet access. So I think most of those people in the world, they don't have disposable income to kind of invest in risky new technologies. They're going to get crypto for the first time by completing some task or job because they want to earn money, or a friend or a charity sends it to them, or there's a product or service they want to use where the only way to do it is like to get crypto. So it's like, I really want to play this game, or I really want to, upvote this thing on this social media thing, but I don't really care about the crypto, but I'll go like get it really quick and put in my credit card just to get a little bit of crypto to go use the thing I want. And then they'll slowly get into this ecosystem, and more and more people will have a percentage of their net worth, like not just in their local fiat currency, like dollars, but hey, I have my internet economy identity online or my gamer thing or whatever. And that's where I'm holding my crypto money. And by the way, all these crypto goods as well, various things that I've picked up in various like favorite artists or like in a game. And I think it'll flip at some point where it's like this mentality shift of, are you first, people have all different types of identities, right? Is my primary identity, the school I went to, like, this military thing, or is it the country I grew up in, or is it, like in a more global sense, like my identity is I'm a global citizen and I have this online identity, and maybe I feel a stronger sense of identity with like this Facebook group or like Y Combinator or some kind of online community of people or like a subreddit. And I think that mental shift for like there'll be a whole generation of kids that grow up that are sort of like digital natives, and their online identities may actually be more important to them than like where they're geographically located in any given moment.
Yeah.
thank you for being an awesome board member. I feel like you've taught me a lot, and you're like one of the best visionaries in technology. So thank you for inviting me.
Letting us be investors. Thank you all for coming.